All right, guys. Your homework tonight is going to be very similar to this. This is pretty easy, don't you agree? Our lesson today is going to take up a lot of time, but your homework is mainly looking at a picture of a line and writing the equation. Where you look for the y-intercept, you look for the slope, and then you write the equation. There's a couple of problems on your homework, and a couple that we're going to do right now, where you actually have to do a little bit of work, and actually you get your calculator to do the work for you. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Right now, all of these types of lines, I would expect you to be able to give me the equation with no problem. Number 1, what's the equation of line number 1? This guy down here. Okay, don't just tell me -2, though. Yeah, line number 1, this blue one, is y equals -2. Where did the x go? Yeah, now the x isn't 0. The slope is 0. So if we wanted to write it more like what looks like slope-intercept form, it would look like y equals 0x minus 2. But normally 0 times x is just 0, so we don't even normally write that. So a horizontal line is like y equals a number. And if you forget that, which sometimes kids do, I just look at some points. This point is at 0, -2. This point is at 1, -2. This point is at 2, -2. You start to notice, hey, all the y values are the same. That's why the equation is y equals -2. All right, line number 2, the purple one. What's the equation of this purple guy? Y equals -1/3, because you had to find yourself some nice whole number points, even though I didn't put dots for you. The slope is going down 1/3, down 1/3. So my slope is -1/3. That goes in front of x. My y-intercept is 4. So y equals -1/3 x plus 4. Look at this steep red line going up. This one definitely has a positive slope. Number 3. I had to find my own nice little whole number points so I could count out the slope. What's the slope? Yeah, the slope is 3 and the y-intercept is 1. The slope is definitely going up 3 over 1, up 3 over 1. Y-intercept is 1, so now I can write the equation. Y equals 3x plus 1. So most of your homework is going to be questions like that. Isn't that pretty easy? Let's talk about that aqua line, the vertical line going straight up and down. These are the ones you got to be careful with. These are the tricky lines, the outlaw lines, the non-function lines. Now, the slope is undefined. I heard somebody say undefined. The slope of any vertical line is undefined, but every vertical line has its own equation as well. So if I asked you for the equation of this aqua line, you wouldn't tell me undefined. You would tell me what? X equals 5. If I asked you for the slope of that aqua line, you would tell me undefined. Are we okay with that? So isn't that going to be some nice, easy homework? Now, let me show you a question on your homework where you're going to need to do a little bit of work on your own. And really, the work involves just getting the calculator to find the answer for you. Okay, and that would be a question like this, where the y-intercept is not a nice whole number. This is just your warm-up kind of extended, and you will have some homework questions like this. There's 1 or 2 problems on your homework where you cannot just look at it and tell me the answer. Why can't you look at this and tell me the answer? Because what's a decimal? The y-intercept is definitely a decimal / fraction. It's not a nice whole number, and guessing is not going to be good enough. I can tell my y-intercept should be somewhere between 1 and 2. There will be a couple of problems like this on your homework tonight where you're going to have to get out your handy-dandy calculator and get it to help you here find the equation. You can actually do this mathematically as well, but if you know points on a line, where can you go in your calculator? Stat. All you got to know is 2 points on a line, and the calculator can find the whole equation for you. What should my slope end up being? I can get the slope. No, my slope is exactly... What's the slope of this line? 1/3. My slope should end up being 1/3, and my y-intercept should be somewhere between 1 and 2. I'm going to get the calculator to tell me the answer. I need to tell the calculator my data, my 2 points. What point is this right here? 2, comma 2. And this point right here is at -1, comma 1. I know 2 points on a line. Even though I didn't give you the coordinates, I gave you a picture. Where do you go if you know 2 points? Stat. Do that right now. Go to Stat, Edit, enter the points, and you will have at least 1 or 2 on your homework where you're going to have to use your calculator. Trajan, put the book up and do this problem. Always make sure when you go to Stat that you have L1 and L2 there. Make sure nobody accidentally deleted the column. L1 is your X's, L2 is your Y's. This is a line, yes, so you got to do the line. It's called linear regression, line reg. Alright, -1, 1 was one of my points. And 2, 2 was the other point. So always double check yourself that you got your X's and Y's lined up. -1, 1, 2, 2. Now what do I do? Go right back to Stat. I'm already done editing, so now I calculate, and this is a line. Number 4 is the one about lines. And then you hit enter a whole bunch of times. Now, it gave us decimal answers. Hopefully 1/3 and 2/3. I want you to be familiar with those. What's the slope here? The slope. 1/3. 0.3 repeating is 1/3. What's the y-intercept? Yeah, 1 and 1/3. And if I didn't know for sure, I would put 1.3, a bunch of 3's, and then I would just hit math. It's already on fraction. Enter, enter, and sure enough, the y-intercept is 4/3. Or 1 and 1/3. Didn't we say the slope should have been 1/3? We already counted that out. So this equation would be y equals 1/3 x plus 4/3, which makes sense from the picture. I knew the slope. The y-intercept is in between 1 and 2 at 1 and 1/3. Yes. No. Yes. On your homework, I want fraction answers. And improper fractions are fine. And yes, you will have at least 1 or 2 on the homework where you can't just look at it because the y-intercept is not a nice number, a nice whole number. So you'll have to turn to your calculator. Are we good with that? Okay, get out your homework. I'm going to go ahead and keep recording. So we got so many kids out. So if you were out, hopefully you're watching the video and grading your homework honestly. Here's page 313, 10 to 19. I told you to force the x's to be positive. What we did last time was we learned how to go from slope-intercept form to standard form. Say that one more time. Yes. If your x's end up being negative and I told you to force them to be positive, that means you got to divide everything by -1. Everything will change, or else you can't just change one part of an equation. You got to change everything. All right, these are going to be 10 points each. Please let me know if you don't understand something, because being able to go from one form to another is an absolute critical skill, even for today's lesson. Any questions on page 313? Yeah, that's what we learned yesterday. You cannot have fractions in standard form. That was one of the hugest aspects of standard form. Standard form does not have fractions. So the first thing that we did was we got rid of any fractions. You cannot just put x's and y's on the same side. That's another part of standard form. But you also had to get rid of fractions. That was what our whole lesson was about. Zoe, did you need to see one? Number 10 on page 313. Okay, number 10 looks like this, right? Y equals 2/3 x plus 5. This is in slope-intercept form. We need to change it to standard form, which means no fractions allowed. What can I multiply this whole equation by? 3. Everything must get multiplied by 3. 3 times y is 3y. 3 times 2/3. You can use your calculator to do that, or you can just kind of use your brain. That's going to be 6/3, which is just 2x. If you hate fractions and absolutely need your calculator, that's fine too. 3 times 2/3 is 2, and don't forget the x. And then you got to do 3 times 5 as well. Okay, so that was the biggest part, getting rid of the fraction. Now, x's and y's have to be on the same side, so this x group needs to come over to the other side. That means I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. So negative 2x plus 3y equals 15. And then I told you, please force the x's to be positive. So we're going to divide this whole equation by -1, or multiply the whole equation by -1. No matter what, every sign is going to change. Negative 2x became positive. Oh, wait. This is number 10. Negative 2x became positive 2x. Plus 3y became minus 3y, and positive 15 became negative 15. All right, anything else? Pass those up. They're 10 points each. There was 10 questions there. Pass them up, and get out your notes. All right, we're talking about parallel lines, and then we're also going to look at horizontal and vertical lines. Actually, let's do horizontal and vertical first. Let's get that out of the way, because that's the easiest part of this lesson. And I really feel like you guys are good at this already. I think Miss Wynn did a great job with horizontal and vertical lines. Okay, what can you tell me about horizontal lines? They go like that. They're like the horizon. They're completely flat. They are completely flat. That means they have zero rise. Absolutely completely flat. What else mathematically can you tell me about them? There is a slope. Absolutely is a slope. And what is it? The slope is 0. That's a very legitimate number. You guys don't like the number 0 for some reason, but it has a slope and it is 0. So if I tell you I'm thinking of a line with a slope of 0, automatically in your head you should be picturing a completely flat horizontal line. They are functions. They are perfectly legitimate lines. They are functions. I can put them in my calculator. They all start out y equal, and it's just a number. That means there's no x in these. Well, there is an x, but what happens to the x? It got multiplied by 0, so we don't even have to write it because the slope is 0, and slope usually goes in front of x. So when you see the equation of a horizontal line, it's just y equals a number. That means every y number is the same. So how many y numbers do I need to know? 1. Normally you need 2 points, or a point and a slope, to tell the equation of a line, not with the horizontal or vertical. If I tell you it's horizontal and I give you 1 point, you can tell me the equation right away. Okay, so for example, I'm thinking of a line that's horizontal, and it goes through the point 2, 8. What's the equation of the horizontal line that goes through 2, 8? Y equals 8. How do I know that? This y value is 8, and on a horizontal line, all the y values are the same. Are we good with that? Vertical lines. Let's talk about vertical for a minute. These are the outlaw lines. Why are they outlaws? They don't follow any rules, meaning they don't have a slope. These are the ones that don't have a slope. And actually, we say that their slope is undefined. There is no slope. There is no mathematical value you can plug in for a vertical line slope. It doesn't exist. They're also the only ones that are not functions. Why are they not functions? Because the x's are repeating. These lines start out x equal a number. They are the only lines that do not have the letter y anywhere in their equation. They are x equal a number. And on this line, all x numbers are the same on any kind of vertical line. So all you need to know is one x number, and you can write the whole equation. So I'm thinking of a line. It's a vertical line, and it goes through the point 712. What's the equation of the vertical line that goes through 712? X equals 7. Because that's my x number, and if one x number is 7 on a vertical line, all the x numbers have to be 7. So it has no slope, or we say that it's an undefined slope. It's not a function. It starts out with an x instead of a y. Nothing about a vertical line is normal. Now, how are you going to be asked questions about vertical and horizontal lines? Well, I might give you a problem like this. Remember, if I give you 2 points or a point and a slope at this point in your algebra career, you should be able to tell me the equation. I am thinking of a line that goes through the point -4, +8, and it has a slope of 0. What's the equation of that line? Yeah, we don't even have to do any work. If you memorize about vertical and horizontal lines, they become super easy. How do you know it's y equals 8? Yeah, if the slope is 0, that means horizontal. Horizontal lines always have the same y values. Now, the nice thing about these kinds of lines, let's say you forgot that this was a special kind of line, a horizontal line, and you wanted to do the math. What's the only thing we don't know if I give you a point and a slope? The y-intercept. So you could actually do the math here, where we plug everything we know into y equals mx plus b. What's my y number? What's my slope number? 0. What's my x number? Plus b. So I would have 8 equals 0 plus b. What does b equal? 8. Do you see how my y-intercept is the same value as the y value of the point I gave you? So I would write this as y equals 0x plus 8. So if you forget and you don't remember about a horizontal line, no problem. Do the math. Now, what do we normally write for 0x? Nothing. We just normally write y equals 8. Okay, now vertical lines, though, this one, unfortunately, guys, you just have to memorize. I'm thinking of a line that has a slope that is undefined. That should be your first clue that something weird is going on here. And it goes through the point -15, +20. X equals -15. This you just have to memorize. These two weird things, everything about these lines is weird. These two weird things go together. What kind of lines start out with an X instead of a Y? They're the only lines that do that. And all you need is one X value. And unfortunately, if you forget that, there is nothing you can do to plug in to this format and do the math. Because I can't plug in something that's undefined. You can't plug in a number for that. Undefined does not mean 0. Okay. So that's pretty simple, right? Here is one thing that they did several years back. They talked about vertical and horizontal lines, but then they asked about domain and range. Let's talk about the domain and range. Well, what's the equation of that line right there? The equation of this line is x equals 4. And if you forget, if you are given a picture and you forget it, that those are the ones that are outlaws. They don't pass the vertical line test. They start out x equals, but let's say I forget that. Look at some points on the line. What point is this right here? Not 0, 4. 4, 0. What point is this? 4, 1. What point is this? All of the x values are 4. Okay, but what if I asked you for the domain and range? Domain is the left and right edge of the picture. It's the x values of the picture. Well, let's talk about domain first. What's domain? Yeah, domain is just 4. All of the x values on this line are 4. If you want to put x equals 4, that's fine. Domain is about x's. What's the range? The range is all real numbers because it doesn't have a top and a bottom. What do I see at the top and the bottom? Arrows. Okay, what is the domain and range of this guy? The domain is 1. The range is all real numbers. What's the equation? X equals 1. What's the slope of this thing? Undefined. So you got to know all those things about a vertical line. Let's look at horizontal. What's the equation of this line? Y equals 2. What's the slope of this line? 0. What's the domain of this line? All real numbers. Because if you look at the left and right edge, it goes on forever. What's the range, though? The range is just 2. Every y value on that picture is a 2. Okay, what is the domain of this guy? All real numbers. What's the range of this guy? -4. What's the equation? Y equals -4. What's the slope? 0. So you got to know all that stuff about vertical and horizontal lines. But that's pretty simple, right? Yes? Okay. So that's pretty much your vertical and horizontal. Now let's move on to parallel lines. And this isn't hard either, but you got to really pay attention to what you're going to be asked here. Okay, now let's talk about parallel lines. Which we did mention this yesterday during the warm-up. We've mentioned it a couple of times in the past, but we've never really taken notes on it. Everybody should be writing this down. What can you tell me about parallel lines? They never intersect, absolutely. They have the same slope. Exactly. Same slope, but different y-intercepts. Parallel lines have the same slope, but different y-intercepts. Well, that's a pretty simple concept. If you could picture parallel lines, I'm going to draw a line that's got a slope of 1. And then I draw another line that's got a slope of 1. They're never going to intersect. They've got the exact same slope, but what's different about them? They're y-intercepts. Parallel lines, same slope, different y-intercepts. Now, how are you going to be asked about this mathematically? Well, let's think about this for a second. One of the biggest skills you've got to be able to do is find the equation of a line if I give you a point on the line and a slope. If I give you a point on a line and I tell you what the slope is, you should be able to mathematically figure out the equation. You should also be able to do that with 2 points. But if I give you 2 points, your job's easy. Where do you go if I give you 2 points? Stat edit, stat calculate. Unfortunately, a point and a slope, you got to do some math there. Okay, now in the past, on the ones we've done so far, I flat out told you what the point was to use, and I flat out told you what slope to use, and you had to find the y-intercept. But look how they can do it now that we know that parallel lines have the same slope. Are you ready? I am thinking of a line, and your job is to find the equation of the line that I am going to be describing. That's what we're doing for this whole little lesson. Your job is to find the equation of the line I'm describing. All right, the line I am thinking of contains the point 4, -3. So I have given you a point. What do I still have to give you? A slope, but listen to how I'm going to tell you the slope. The line you're trying to find has to be parallel to, that's the symbol for parallel, parallel to y equals 3x minus 7. So I have given you a point, and in a tricky way, I am also giving you a slope. Okay, because I told you to be parallel to this guy right here. What can you tell me about this line? The y-intercept is -7 and the slope is 3. Well, what do parallel lines have in common? The same slope, but different y-intercept. So do I need that -7? No. My y-intercept is not going to be -7. But my slope is going to be 3. So, in other words, I have, in a tricky way, I have told you what slope to use. But this is how they determine that parallel lines have the same slope but different y-intercepts. You ignore this y-intercept. Your job is to find our y-intercept. Our y-intercept is not -7. We don't know what our y-intercept is. We know what our slope has to be. It has to be 3. But we don't know our y-intercept. But luckily, we have some information to where we can figure it out. I gave you a point and a slope. So we're going to plug everything we know into y equals mx plus b. What's my y number? -3. That's from my point. What's my slope number? 3, because I figured out from the information I gave you, parallel lines have the same slope. What's my x number? 4. So I'm using my point and my slope, and I'm going to find the b. So I have -3 equals 12 plus b. What's my b value? -15. So what's the equation that I was trying to find? Y equals 3x minus 15. Did I end up parallel to the line I was supposed to be parallel to? Yes. How do I know? They have the same slope, but they have different y-intercepts. How else can I make sure that this is correct? But what am I checking for? Well, I could put them both in there and make sure they don't touch, but what else? What other information has to work? Has to be true? The point I gave you better be on your line. Okay, so I'm going to put in y equals 3x minus 15, and that point that I started with, 4, -3, it better be there, is it? Yes, so I do definitely have the right point. I can tell I've got the right slope. So yeah, that should be correct. So that is one way they're going to ask you a question. You try one. Number 2, I am thinking of a line that goes through the point 6, -4, and it is parallel to y equals -2/3 x plus 15. So what information am I giving you about the line? I'm giving you a point that has to be on the line, and I am telling you a slope. What slope are you supposed to use? -2/3. What should not be the same? The y-intercept should be different. We shouldn't get a plus 15 for our y-intercept. We don't need this number. We just needed the slope number. It will have a y-intercept, and it should be a different y-intercept than 15. Is it 0? Okay, now 0 is a number, so this means it's going to cross the y-axis at the origin. So you would go y equals m times x plus b, -4 equals, that's going to be -12, -4, and sure enough, the b value ended up being 0. So what's the equation then? Y equals -2/3 x plus 0, or you could just leave it like y equals -2/3 x. Did I end up parallel? Yes, because I used the same slope. What's the other thing that better be true? The point I gave you better be on that line. Y equals -2/3 x. Let's look at the table of values. Is the point 6, -4 on that line? Sure is. Okay, so that is one way to give you a point and a slope. Look at this question. I am thinking of a line. The line must go through point Q, and I want to be parallel to line L. So this is like a visual clue. I got to go through point Q, and I want to be parallel to line L. So I am giving you a point and a slope, but in a tricky way. What point am I telling you better use? 3, 1. I didn't tell you the coordinates. I gave you a picture of it, but point Q is at 3, 1. What slope am I telling you to use? 2/3, because this line has a slope of 2/3 up 2 and over 3, and parallel lines have to have the same slope. All right, you do the math now. Do the math. You cannot, the calculator can't do this step for you. You need to be writing down some math here. You got to plug everything you know into y equals mx plus b. Plug in your y number, your m number, your x number, and then you're going to solve for b. What's my y-intercept? It should be -1. Mathematically, I worked it out. It should be -1. So what's my whole equation? Y equals 2/3 x minus 1. And if you had the benefit of this being right in front of you, you could have gone up 2 and over 3, or down 2. Oh, wait, is that right? What now? Yeah, this does work. If you go up 2 and over 3, or down 2 and backwards 3, look where you're going to cross the y-axis. You're going to cross the y-axis at -1, so it is true. Y'all didn't get this? Are we okay with this one? Okay, so they can give you a visual clue. They can just tell you the line it wants to be parallel to, or they can show you a picture of the line to be parallel to, and then here's the trickiest thing they can do. They could tell you a point. I want to go through the point, -6, +4, and I want to be parallel to 3x minus 2y equals 12. Do you see why this is even trickier? Trey, you have got to be doing these problems. Why is this trickier? Yeah, I can't tell what the slope of this line is because this line is in standard form. So I can't really tell much useful information about this line right now. I have got to know what this line's slope is because I've got to use the same slope. So what am I going to have to do? You're going to have to convert this to slope-intercept form. Do that. So this problem takes several steps. You got to know how to convert. You got to know parallel lines have the same slope. You got to know how to plug in a point and a slope. So I'm going to have to move that 3x over, divide everything by -2, and all of that work just so I can actually start the problem. What slope did y'all get? Yeah, the equation in slope-intercept form should have been y equals 3 over 2x minus 6. What am I supposed to use? 3 over 2. What's not going to be the same? Yeah, my y-intercept should not be -6. I should get a different y-intercept because I've got to go through this point, but I do have to use this slope. So several steps involved here. You had to find the slope first by converting. Then you have to take that slope and that point and plug everything you know into y equals m times x plus b. You had to figure out what b is. What did y'all get for b? And your calculator can help you like with the multiplying and the subtracting and the fractions, but I did get a b value of 13. So what's my equation then? Y equals 3 over 2x plus 13. Do you see how I ended up with the same slope but a different y-intercept? Because I had to use this point. This point wasn't on the line that I was parallel to. It's on my line though, or it should be. If I want to make sure it is, I got to check it. Y equals 3 over 2x plus 13. There's really no way to check that you got the right slope. You just had to make sure you solve for y correctly. But you can at least check that negative 6, 4 is on the line, and it is. Okay, I want you to do a few problems on your own, and then I'll tell you what the homework is. I'll tell you what, I'll take out this one. And I'll take out number 4. But I want you to do 1, 3, and 5. I'm going to pause the recording, so if you're watching this at home, folks, you need to pause this, try these on your own, and then unpause when you're ready to see the answers. Alright, number 1 wasn't too bad, because at least the line I gave you was already in slope-intercept form. What slope are you supposed to use? 3. What should be different? The y-intercept should not be a minus 5. If it is, you end up with the exact same line, not a parallel line. Alright, so 4 equals 3 times 6 plus b. 4 equals 18 plus b. What's b? Negative 14. So your equation should be y equals 3x minus 14. And if you checked your 0.64, if you put a 6 in here, you get 18 minus 14, which is 4. The 0.64 is going to be on your t-chart. And I know I'm parallel because I ended up with the same slope but different y-intercepts. Number 2 was a little trickier. The line I told you to be parallel to was not in the right form. You had to move some stuff around. You had to divide by 3. So you should have figured out your slope for number 3 was negative 2/3. Did y'all get that? Right. So I should get a different y-intercept though. What did y'all get for this one? Y equals negative 2/3 x minus 4 or plus 4? Ended up with the same y-intercept? Ooh, that's a mistake. Sorry. I just made these up. I don't even know how that happened. Y'all ended up with the exact same y-intercept? That means that was my mistake then. Because sometimes when you make up algebra problems, it doesn't work out. These are not parallel. These are actually the exact same line. That was my bad. Sorry. First period, we didn't notice that. Okay, but we know what slope to use and we know how to do the math, right? That was a freak occurrence. All right, number 4 I scratched out. Number 5. Number 5, I can at least get the slope. My slope is 1/3. But I can't tell what the y-intercept is exactly. So what do I have to do? There is some like this on your homework. You got to go to Stat Edit, Stat Calculate. I didn't tell you the points, but I gave you a picture of the points. What is this point right here? What's this red point? Negative 2, comma, negative 2. So I'm going to put in negative 2 as one of my points. And then this point right here is at positive 1, negative 1. So I'm going to put in positive 1, negative 1. And then I do stat, calculate. This is a line, so I'm looking at number 4. I'm getting y equals 0.3 repeating for my slope, which is 1/3. Y equals 1/3 x, which I knew the slope was 1/3 because I could count it. What is my y-intercept? Minus 4/3. 1.3 repeating is 4/3. Okay, so are we okay with all of the stuff we did today? Alright, your homework is page 319 and 320. You're doing all of them, but I'm telling you most of them only take a second. You're just looking at a picture and writing the equation. There's a few where you actually have to go to Stat Edit, Stat Calculate, Linear Regression, because they don't have a nice whole number y-intercept. But other than that, it's super easy. Plus, there's a bunch of parallel lines, just again to drive home the fact that parallel lines have the same slope but different y-intercepts. You're doing all of them. Page 319 and 320, all of them. Plus, they go very, very quickly. It's really not that much homework, I promise.